pastor and have to come bless it for us.
Well, I wasn't going down that road of doing communion at home. I mean, we're not going to the Catholic Church.
Morning, Steve.
Good morning.
All right, check. Good. We're good online?
Yep.
Oh, I guess, just wait, is this the one that?
No, the two.
Okay.
All right, so
Dana went.
welcome visitors. I forgot your name already. I'm sorry.
John and Stephanie.
John and Stephanie, welcome back. Haven't seen you in 6 months. So we are going through the study on
I
Ruth.
think it's close to it, not back up and get this one. I think we're past.
So what we need, again, because the numbering system on this study is weird and I goofed up, we need the questions that are on the back of the lesson 2 packet, which are, the questions are labeled lesson 3, even though they apply to lesson 4. This is what I was dealing with when I bought this study. Yeah, so you want the lesson 4 packet has the notes that we'll run through if we have time, but lately we've been getting too distracted on the questions, and that's really all we have time for. So the lesson 4 notes you'll probably have to look over on your own time, but we're doing the lesson 3 questions, which are on the back of the lesson 2 packet. So it should say, hopefully there's lesson 2 packets there for everyone who was not here last week to pick one up, but it should say lesson 3, Ruth 2, 1 through 23 at the top of the question packet, which applies to lesson 4, Ruth 2, 1 through 23. So we're going through Ruth 2, 1 through 23, which is the entirety of chapter 2 today, and we'll do what we did last week, or I'll read the chapter, and we'll go through the questions, and if we still have time, we'll go over the notes that the study writer leaves for us, but most of those notes we kind of end up going through the questions anyway, so if we don't get to them, you're not really missing out on too much, but again, you can take the packet home and read over that on your own time if you like. And now that I've figured out how the numbering system works, we have the questions for next week are on the back of the lesson 4 packet. So going home today, all you should need is the lesson 4 packet, which then has the lesson 4 questions that actually apply to lesson 5, which are technically your homework that you can do on your own time throughout the week. But again, we go through the answers in the study, so if you don't get around to it, I'm not grading you. You don't fail. It's okay. All right, so last week, Naomi made the decision to journey back to Israel because the famine has ended, so she doesn't have to reside in Moab anymore. So she's preparing to go back home. Her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, are prepared to go with her, but Naomi says, no, you should stay here. Like, you're going to have a much better chance of finding a husband among your own people. Just stay there, get married again, and have a good life. Orpah listens to the advice. She remains in Moab, presumably finds a husband. I don't know. She doesn't get mentioned after this. But Ruth vows that she's going to stick with Naomi. She returns to Israel. So they come back, and Naomi's kind of a downer. She's like, don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara, because life just sucks. So chapter 2 is now looking at their lives as they return to Israel. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been told fully to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land, and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Then she said, I have found favors in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoke kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. And at mealtime Boaz said to her, Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, What did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, The man's name with whom I worked today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. Naomi also said to her, This man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. And Ruth the Moabite said, Besides, he said to me, You shall keep close to my young men until they have finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted. So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. All right, so turning to the lesson 3 questions, which again are on the back of the lesson 2 packet because everything's crazy. All right, question number 1. Naomi's deceased husband had no brothers. Did Elimelech have any other relatives? And if so, who was he and how is he described?
Just a relative.
Yeah, he's a relative.
This is a worthy man.
Boaz, yeah, he's described as a worthy man. So the word that we translate to worthy, it's kind of an amalgamation of just general good stuff about it. He's a good man, he's a decent man, God-fearing man. It's kind of a catch-all phrase for whatever you'd say about a good person. So he's related to Elimelech. We don't know exactly how. He's not a brother, because that would change things a little bit. But he is of the clan of Elimelech, which qualifies him to be a redeemer, which we'll talk about towards the end of the packet. But he is in the family tree somewhere, somewhat close, I would think, but maybe cousin or second cousin, something like that. Question 2. Ruth and Naomi had just returned home from Moab, which is roughly a 30-mile trip. What is the first thing Ruth asked to do, and what provision has the Lord made for people like Naomi and Ruth? Cross-reference to Leviticus 19. So Leviticus 19:9 and 10, God commands, When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So what's the first thing Ruth asks to do when they get back to Israel?
Yes, in the field.
Right. He has to go out to glean in the field, and just to be nice little Sunday school reminders. What exactly is gleaning then, as we saw in Leviticus?
Gathering grain.
And we gathering the leftover grain.
Right. So this was the welfare system of ancient Israel, because they are called to make provisions for the poor, but at the same time, the poor are still expected to do some kind of work to earn it for themselves. So cross-reference to 2 Thessalonians, where Paul tells us, "He who does not work shall not eat." So the welfare system was that when you had laid, when it's time to harvest, you don't harvest the entire field. You leave the outer edge unharvested, and as you're harvesting, you kind of you make one pass down the row, and whatever you miss, you leave behind. You don't go back and do a second sweeping to make sure you picked everything up. So that way, the poor, those who don't have access to land of their own that they can harvest, they go to the fields and they harvest their own grain from around the outer edge, and they make the second pass up and down the rows where they've been doing the harvesting, and whatever they can pick up, those are their gleanings. And so it's a provision left behind for the poor and the sojourner, those who don't have land of their own to harvest. But at the same time, they're still expected to do some labor on their own behalf. For those who aren't actually able to work, either if they're infirm or old or something, you have other provisions for them as well. But the poor are they're not enabled to be slothful where they can just sit on the couch all day and people will come and bring them food as part of their welfare package. They still have to actually go out and do some of the labor themselves. So Naomi and Ruth, they come back to Israel. They don't have access to their own land to harvest. The only way they can get food is by gleaning. And so Ruth is like, Naomi, you're kind of old. You stay home, get some rest. I'm going to go out and glean. I'll bring you back some grain, and that's how we'll get our provisions through the harvest system and harvest season and stock up for the winter. So she wants to go out to glean. That's the provision that God has left behind for the poor and the sojourner to make sure that they're taken care of in the land. Everything's all fitting nicely together. Making sense? Mm-hmm. Good. Any other thoughts, comments, feedback? Okay. All right, question 3 then. So Ruth was a new resident in Bethlehem. Whose field did she begin to glean in, and do you think this was simply a fortunate choice? Cross-reference to Isaiah 58.
Initially, Boaz's field, where she started. He had part of the field.
Actually, she starts somewhere else. Verse 3, so she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come into the part of the field belonging to Boaz. So you didn't necessarily have it like today where each farmer has kind of his own plot of land. You could have a large stretch of land where everything was planted, and I don't know how they mark it, but there'd just be kind of dividers in the field. So you just kind of start on one edge of the field and you start working your way over, and you might go through like 3 or 4 different farmers' land. So she just kind of goes to the edge of the field, she starts working her way across, and then she happens into Boaz's field, but then Boaz takes notice of her, and then she remains in Boaz's field for the rest of the account.
Part of it might be that the reapers weren't necessarily employees of the landowners.
Right.
Similar to how grain harvest is done now. Mm-hmm. And so they were just moving in an efficient manner, and the land holdings would have been smaller and more mixed. Similar to how Fallon has smaller parcels than if you get somewhere else that was developed either later or earlier.
Okay.
So if you're just going from field to field, then she was probably just following hired guys that were harvesting from multiple landowners.
Yeah. I'm going to repeat the gist of what you said because anyone watching online, they can only hear through me, so I'm not talking down to you and I repeat everything. So, I don't have a lot of farming experience, so I can't really compare contemporary farming practices to what's happening in the Bible. As Matthew, John, sorry, one of those Bible names, as Jonathan was pointing out. Yeah, it's entirely possible they had smaller plots of land, and the reapers may not necessarily have been hired by any individual landowner, just kind of collectively hired, and they would just kind of go across the whole swath. That would be more efficient, and then each landowner would harvest what comes from their own land. That's what the young women do that Boaz is talking about. They follow the reapers behind. The reapers, they just cut the grain and move on. The young women are the ones who bundle up the grain into the sheaves and then bring it over to the threshing floor. And so Ruth just kind of starts behind them and starts following them, and eventually she makes her way into Boaz's field, and then she stays there for the rest of the time. Our cross-reference to Isaiah 58:11 reads, "And the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your desire in scorched places and make your bones strong, and you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters do not fail." So you think it's simply a fortunate choice or coincidence that she winds up in Boaz's field?
No, it was God's guidance.
Right, so there's some providence happening here. God is guiding her away. He's leading her to where she's supposed to be. Despite what Naomi said at the end of chapter 1, God has not forsaken her. She just can't necessarily see what his plan is in the moment, but he's watching over and providing for Ruth, and he's guiding her to be in Boaz's field. Because again, Ruth is genealogically important because she and Boaz are going to be the great grandparents of David, who obviously is a significant figure in the Bible. So God is at work in the whole affair as well, which is part of the theme of Ruth, is this depending on God even in the even when he may seem absent, even when you're facing the weird stuff happening in life that you can't necessarily explain, God is still there watching over you. And in the end, it works out to your good. Sometimes it will be like Ruth, where it is earthly good stuff ends up happening to you, and it's not until it actually happens that you can look back and be like, oh, God actually was with me the whole way. Footprints in the sand foam. Or, sometimes the good stuff doesn't happen to you in this life, and it's not until you die and you go into heaven, and then you get to look back and you be like, oh, okay, all those hardships actually kept me in the face so I can end up here. So it was ultimately to my good, I just didn't see it down there. That's one of the themes we're watching out for as we look through Ruth. Make sense? I'm still making sense. Good. I did not get a lot of sleep last night. All right, question 4. But when Boaz arrived in his field, what words did he use to greet his workers, and how did the workers respond?
He said, "The Lord be with you," and they said, "The Lord bless you."
Yep, so they have this nice doxological call and response. He greets them saying, "The Lord be with you." He greets them in the name of the Lord. This is how the pastor greets the congregation in the liturgy. 3 times in the service. One is before the general prayer of the church, before the readings, and then before communion, and then after communion, if I remember correctly. I will stand here and I'll say, "The Lord be with you," and then depending on which divine service you're using, you'll say, "And also with you," or "And with your spirit." If you're in the seminary for 1 year, they try to combine them into "and also with you and with your spirit," because people always mix up which one they say. It kind of depends on which divine service you grew up saying. But we pull that greeting and that response from Ruth primarily. I think there's another citation in the Bible where that happens. But yeah, this is getting back to this description of Boaz being a worthy man. He's not just saying, "Hi guys, how you doing?" But he's also giving them a blessing in the name of the Lord. So this is pointing to Boaz being a godly man and recognizing how God is involved in everything. It's not just, "Hey, we're having a fun time harvesting the barley here." It's, God has blessed us with this barley. Let's acknowledge his presence here with us as we harvest what he has given to us. And then the workers respond, "The Lord bless you," which maybe it points to the workers being godly as well, or it could, at that point, could just be kind of a cultural response when someone says it in the same way as, we say, the Lord be with you, and then you just, as Lutherans, we already probably say, and also with you. And you watch Star Wars, and it says, may the Force be with you, and then we all say, and also with you. All right. Which brings us to question 5, then. How do you think a similar greeting would be met in our society today?
Probably not as well as the Force be with you.
Yeah.
However, I think we probably offend someone every day, but probably more likely every hour.
Yeah.
But I think it would be fun if we went out there and just did that.
I'm gonna try it this
I
week.
think we should just do it.
And
I'm gonna be ready to punch
if we did say, and also with you as one on the Force be with you, maybe it's like when the elders in the camp that weren't with Joshua and with Moses. When the elders that remained still got the Spirit, and then Moses said that he wished that there'd be a day that everyone had. I mean, that's a little bit of a jaunt to the side.
But we love tangents here. That's the, like I said, in our liturgy, one of the responses to the Lord be with you is, and with your spirit. I think it's kind of getting to that idea, recognizing it's the whole of you. Because when the Bible talks about your spirit, it's a little bit, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to translate directly with the Hebrew, so we just say spirit. It's nefesh, I think is the Hebrew word. Don't quote me on that, I haven't looked at it in a long time. But it's this idea of yourself and your whole self. So when it says, and with your spirit, I think our instinct is to jump to, it's talking about our soul, but it's a little bit different than the soul. And sort of like when Jesus is asked about the greatest commandment, and he says that it's love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. We have this distinction between soul and mind, whereas in contemporary cosmology we kind of combine those. And it's the same way with spirit. It's not just talking about your soul, when it talks about with your spirit, it's referring to your whole self, your body and your soul joined together. I'm going really left field now, I'm sorry. When we respond and with your spirit, we're referring to God not just being with you bodily and not just God being with you spiritually, even though we draw that spiritual connection. But really when we say and with your spirit, we're reflecting God being with you in your entirety. It's your whole self. I have no idea how I got here anymore. Sorry, my daughter was up at like midnight to 2. And I didn't sleep a lot.
I'm wondering, just because it's a cultural thing with us, and I kind of think I'm going to try it. Mm-hmm. But I really wonder, while there will be some who would probably be taken aback if you said the Lord be with you. Mm-hmm. I'm not so certain that you might be surprised at how many people may kind of roll on their heels for a second and then come back with something, well, also with you, or God bless you, or, it's kind of like, when you go out to eat dinner, we try not to make a big deal of it, but we quietly say grace before we eat. And sometimes you get the feeling that we're the only people that do that. Mm-hmm. And then there have been a few times where we've seen a family sitting there with their little kids, and they bow their heads and say grace. I've made it a point to go to them as we're leaving and thank them for that. Mm-hmm. Because I said, I was getting to the point where I thought maybe we were the only people left on earth who still said grace. And it strengthened me seeing you do that. And it brightened their day. Mm-hmm. I think there are a whole lot more of us that would probably respond positively than there are who respond negatively. I think I'm going to try.
Yeah, so getting back for those watching online who have not heard any of this conversation, getting back to the actual question of how will this greeting be met in society today, part of it's contextual, like people coming into church, you say the Lord be with you, they'll probably, yeah, we're pretty trained by rote, they'll probably say it also with you, or, and with your spirit. Outside of the church, you might get some looks that you may probably will offend people, because we're not supposed to talk about religion outside of the church anymore. Religion and politics are the two forbidden discussions, except that's all no one talks about anymore. But we also brought up this idea that, maybe that's kind of the defeatist mindset that we keep slipping into that we probably shouldn't. And maybe if we start greeting people in the outside world, they'll probably be taken aback, because it's not a regular greeting in our culture, but maybe we'll be surprised and we'll find there's more faithful people out there than we thought, and they might say, you too, I guess, or something, they'll take it back. So the Reaps are going to do a social experiment. They're going to start using this in everyday life as a greeting, and they'll report back to us on how it goes.
Or I'll talk to you from the hospital.
No, that's what I was thinking, you punched in your face.
If you look at the root of the word goodbye, though, it's the exact same word,
Yeah.
God be with you. It's
Yeah.
just the bastardization of the original three words.
Yeah.
And it's very common still in American culture, although no one knows what it means.
Yeah. So, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Jonathan, that's what's pointing out. Yeah, when we say goodbye, technically we're saying God be with you, and it just got mushed together over time. That used to be the common farewells, either Godspeed or God be with you. Last time I really heard of anyone saying Godspeed was when John Glenn, when he said Godspeed John Glenn when he first entered orbit. That's fallen way by the wayside. That's when you're being old-timey English talk, you say Godspeed. But goodbye is just a combination of God be with you, the same way that the word holiday was originally holy day, because they were days set aside for either church festivals or observances of the faith of the saints, is that saints' holy day. And it becomes holiday, and then it becomes a word for any kind of day off or any day of celebration, and as a whole, we forgot what it means. The same way when we say goodbye, you're saying God be with you, you got changed over time to now it's just a general farewell word. We don't really think about what it means. So yeah, we are invoking God in our regular, everyday, outside of church conversations more than we think. We just don't realize it because of how language shifts over time. Yes.
Cassandra here says that her and Frank says grace when they ever eat outside.
Okay, yeah. Cassandra and Grace, Cassandra and Frank say they say grace whenever they eat outside. Walt was talking about that as well. That's another, you don't make a huge show of it, but it's still a way to witness your faith, and it's not something that you should not do just because there's other people around and want to make you uncomfortable. There's always kind of this, maybe not a fine line, but there is a line to walk when it comes to the issue of public prayer. Because we are called to pray continually, and we should be giving thanks to God before a meal, and by all means witness the fact that you confess God provided that food for you ultimately, and you want to give thanks to Him. But at the same time, you don't want to be like the Pharisee and the publican, where you're just making a big show of yourself and you're demonstrating to everyone how pious you are. Hey, everyone, look at me and what a good Christian I am that I'm praying before my meal. So you want to make sure you have the right intentions behind it all. But yeah, praying before eating, even when you're in public, that's good. We should be praying before every meal. We talked about that, I think, last week. So yeah, that's a good witness. There's one other tangent I was going to go on, that the goodbye thing sent me on. It's in one of Luther's writings. I forget which. I think it's in the Large Catechism. But at one point he goes off on this tangent on its. I think it's in one of his explanations. I think it's the Large Catechism's explanation of the first article of the Creed, where you recognize that God is the creator of everything, and he's not the clockmaker who creates the world and then he steps back to watch it all run. He's actively involved in everything, and so we thank God for everything. And he brings up this point that Germans are better at doing this than all other cultures, because in the German language, the word for good is gut, and the word for God is Gott, and they're so similar, they must have the exact same root, and so anytime you're saying something is good, you're recognizing it's from God, which is a really nice thought, but etymologically that's not how that works. Gut and Gott have completely different origin roots in the development of the German language. So it was factually incorrect, but it was a nice sentence. So take that for what it's worth. But we have that same thing in English, because English largely derives from German. Good and God are very similar words, and so that if that can help you think about everything that you call good is from God, and so you should thank God for all good things. By all means, use as a nice little mnemonic device. Just don't tell people that they linguistically have the same root, because they don't.
Well, Jesus said, no one is good but God.
Right, no one is good but God.
Right, so good is God in that way.
Yeah, but we still receive good things from God as well. Like it's good that you have clothes and shelter and food, and so you thank God for giving you those good things as well. But yeah, that's a good point.
Those are gifts from God.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah, only God is good. Said those two words too close together too quick. Too much. All right. Question 6 then. So what? After Boaz greets his men, what does he ask his foreman? Right. So he asks, "Whose young woman is this?" Which is actually 2 questions in one. Because if he just wanted to know who she is, he would say, "Who's that?" Instead, he says, "Whose young woman is this?" So he's asking for her identity, but also who she belongs to, which can go 2 ways. Either, remember, the owners of the land, they have their own young women who follow behind the reapers to actually bundle up the grain. So there's a chance he thinks, is she Bob's young woman and she's stealing my grain from us? Do we know who she is? I don't think that's quite the insinuation, but you could maybe read it that way. Or, and this is the more natural reading, he's asking kind of like, who is her family? What household does she belong to? Whose guardianship is she under, kind of thing? Which, as we read on and we see how it progresses, we know that Boaz is taking a liking to her, and so the gears are already starting to turn into his head. He's like, if stuff works out, who am I going to have to talk to about marrying her? Who is her overseer? And in finding in a small town where everyone kind of knows each other, and in a culture where everything is largely based on your family's reputation, asking whose household she belongs to already tells you a lot about her. Is she an Israelite? Is she a foreigner? Does she come from a good family, a bad family? Are they in good standing with the community or not? Finding out what clan or household she belongs to can tell a lot about him. So that's, as awkward as it may be to say, whose young woman is this, as opposed to who is she, it actually does would provide him with a lot more information, which is why he phrases it that way. Is that all making sense? And how does the foreman respond?
Explains who she is.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. She's the Moabite woman who came here with Naomi. And again, that gives him a fair amount of information. He knows she's a Moabite, not an Israelite. But she's the one who came with Naomi. Again, small town. Naomi's return was kind of a big talk. There was a fair reaction when people came back. Boaz is tangentially related to Ruth, to Naomi, so he probably already has an idea of what's going on, and he's like, "Oh, that's her, okay." Because then, when he talks to her, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about it in further questions. Like, he tells Ruth, "I heard about the things you've done," so she already has a reputation that he hears about. So everything's kind of falling together in his mind as he finds out, oh, this is the girl who came back with Naomi. Okay, I've heard about her. Cool. Good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sorry, we're starting to run a little low on time, so I'm going to rush a tiny bit more. Question 8 then, what did Boaz then say to Ruth, and was he showing special care for her?
Stay to glean in his field and stay close to him.
Right, so he's, don't glean in any other field, don't leave this one, stay in my field, and keep close to my young women, which is he's basically giving her like the top spot in gleaning. So again, the reapers would go through and they cut all the grain, and then the owner's young women follow behind the reapers and they bundle up the grain, and then any gleaners that are there come after the young women to pick up what they may have left behind or missed. And so by telling Ruth, stay close to the young women, he's basically saying, you get to go to the front of the line, so you've got all the choicest gleanings as you go forward. He also tells her to stay in the field. He doesn't want her going into anyone else's. And he says, have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And so he's, sorry. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. So he's giving her special protection. That's part of why he's saying stay in my field, because I can tell my men not to harass you at all. I can't talk about the men when they're working for other guys in this field, but when you're in my field, you're under my special protection. They're not allowed to say, hey, go back to the line, you're gleaning too close. They don't get to say, hey, you're a foreign woman, I can do whatever I want with you because you're not an Israelite. She has a special protection both against, the general workplace gossip type of thing and like the actual assault that a strange foreign woman may face from people. Then he tells her that when she's thirsty, she can go and drink what the young men have drawn, which is a huge inversion of the social order. Because normally the women would be the ones, like, if there's men and women there, it's the women's job to draw the water up to the men because the women are to be subservient. And if you're a foreign woman, no one's going to draw water for you because you're the lowest on the totem pole. But he's saying, the men are going to draw up the water, you get to just drink what they draw up from the well. So that's a huge bump up in social status for her. So Boaz is absolutely showing special care for Ruth in these extra provisions that he's provided for her. So this is our first indication that Boaz is taking a liking to her. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of questions.
Well, and he also knows the story.
Yeah.
It's a small town. He knows that she lost her husband. She knows that her mother-in-law has lost her husband. They've been through great pain. They've traveled a long way. And so he knows that she's been through a lot of hardships. And he's showing kindness.
Yeah, he's also just showing kindness for Ruth because he knows everything that's... Again, he asks the foreman who is that woman. He says, oh, she's the Moabite who was with Naomi. It's a small town. They know the story, so he knows the stuff that Ruth has been through. So yeah, he is showing kindness in response to that too. But again, knowing how the story plays out, I think, yeah, he's interested in her already. And part of it is because he knows the story of what's happened. Because I'm getting ahead of myself. That's like 3 questions down. So I'll stop myself here, and we'll address that when we get to it. Question 9 then, how did Ruth react to Boaz's kindness?
He's asking how she found favor in his eyes.
Right. So she is.
Foreigner.
Yeah. So she actually falls on her face before him, which is not her tripping and being a klutz. This is her like kneeling down and bowing so that her face touches the floor. It's a posture of complete submission. She's very humbled by it, and she says, like, why do I find favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me since I am a foreigner? Remember, Ruth doesn't know who this guy is yet. If someone told her that he's Boaz, she'd be like, okay, he's Boaz. She doesn't necessarily know Naomi's family tree or that this guy's related to Elimelech. Naomi doesn't tell her that in the end of the chapter. So she's just she's doing her thing, she's gleaning, and all of a sudden the owner of the field comes up to her and he's like, hey, here's a whole bunch of privilege for you. And she's like, what is going on? She's shocked, she's amazed, she's a foreign woman, she's like, should be lowest on the totem pole, but now the owner of the field is coming up to her and saying, you get to do all of these special things that you shouldn't actually be able to do given your social standing. And she's just shocked and amazed and has no idea what's going on. So she's like, how? What? Like, thank you, but why?
Obviously, she understands the custom to know that she's been truly blessed with gracious.
Yeah. She knows enough about the society to know that she is being given a great gift and honor and boost in social standing. She's just kind of confused as why, because she doesn't really know who Boaz is or anything. And again, this is the kind of the Christological theme that we get in Ruth. So ultimately, Boaz is the Christ figure in Ruth, and if you're going to allegorize it, which you probably shouldn't, but if you're going to take it into an allegory, Ruth is the common Christian who gets brought into Christ. And so this is what Jesus does for us. We are dirty sinners who don't deserve any gifts from God, and then Jesus comes up to us and is like, hey, I'm adopting you into the family. I'm going to forgive all of your sins. I'm going to put my name upon you. You're going to rule, or you're going to be elevated up to me as my adopted son. You're going to help rule with me in heaven, depending on how you translate that text. And then, the Christian response, when you really understand it, shouldn't be, oh yeah, I'm a pretty good person. God wants me in his family. It should be, why are you taking notice of me? Like, I'm just going to walk around in the back and hope I didn't anger anybody. What is going on? Thank you, but why? That's the Christological approach that we have to Ruth that we'll dig into a little bit more when the Redeemer aspect comes into play with Boaz, because obviously Redeemer is a pretty big word. We connect to Jesus, and we'll see why when we see how Boaz does all of this. Yeah, she's just completely shocked. Like, she's grateful, she's thankful, and she's really shocked that this is happening.
The difference, like, between, say, a Lutheran and a Reformed versus a Baptist, like you're saying allegory wouldn't be the right word. It would be more of a reference to, like, a foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't show you the exact, it's a resemblance, and it shows a lot of characteristics of that relationship between Christ and those that he dies to save.
Yeah.
But it doesn't show the full detail. It's like looking in a mirror that's not polished well.
Yeah.
You don't see the full detail.
Yeah.
And the Old Testament really is a foreshadowing, and that's one of the bigger differences between like a Baptist versus Reformed or Lutheran, where we in general see the Old Testament as a foreshadowing, and we don't see it as something to throw away, something that's totally useless now that there's a new covenant. Or
right.
I guess the new covenant's not even the right. But
allegory was the wrong word. Jonathan was pointing out. Yeah, we see the Old Testament as kind of foreshadowing what happens in the New Testament. We would use the word typology or typological. So this is Boaz is being a type of Christ in the whole story. Ruth is being a type of Christian who gets redeemed by Christ. And then when Jesus comes in the New Testament, that's the anti-type, remembering that anti doesn't necessarily mean the opposite of, it can also mean a replacement of. And so the ways that we see, the ways that things get foreshadowed in the Old Testament, those are the types, and then Jesus takes the place of that type in the anti-type as he fulfills it in a new and better way. And so the way that Boaz is going to take mercy on Ruth and ultimately redeem her is him being a type of Christ that then foreshadows how in the New Testament Jesus is going to have mercy on us and redeem us as the anti-type. He does the same kind of action Boaz does, but in a newer and greater and bigger and eternal, more salvific way. So yes, thank you for correcting my language. Let's see. Now we're up to 10, which I think we've kind of answered before already. But small towns are known for tale-bearing. What had Boaz heard about Ruth?
He heard that she had stayed faithful to her mother-in-law and taken care of her probably well above and beyond what even custom would have required her.
But, yeah, so Boaz basically knows everything that we know at this point. Verse 11, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land, and you came to a people that you did not know before. So he knows that Ruth is a widow. He knows that she's connected to Naomi. He knows that she forsook her people to come back to Israel with Naomi and help take care of her. So, he knows Ruth has had a painful past, but he knows that she remains faithful, that she's loving and caring to Naomi, that she probably already has some kind of faith in the God of Israel, that she's willing to leave her people to put her trust in him when he comes to Israel, because then he says, may a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wing you have come to take refuge. I think I'm answering the next question already. But yeah, he's acknowledging that she's converted to the Israelite religion versus the Moabite religion. So he's heard a lot of good things about her. That's part of why he's so into her and willing to give her all these privileges. Because she asks, why are you bestowing all this on me? He's like, well, I know about you. You kind of deserve some nice things to happen to you. I can't read my handwriting. Okay, yeah, I think that's all the notes I had. Any thoughts on that? We're going to run out of time. All right, question 11. Boaz pronounced a blessing on Ruth. What did he say? And what's the most important part? Like I said, he blesses her. May the Lord repay you for what you've done. He's acknowledging, Ruth has made sacrifices to take over Naomi, but she's done what's righteous. May God repay you for the good things you've done. You deserve nice things. I hope God gives them to you. But then, he says you've taken refuge under his wing. He recognizes that she has converted to the Israelite religion. She's not worshiping Shamash anymore. She's worshiping Yahweh. She's in his land. He is under his refuge. So even though, she's a Moabite and a foreigner, he's kind of recognizing her as an Israelite because she is in Israel taking refuge under God. That making sense?
Mm-hmm.
How does Ruth respond to the blessing? Again, she's still just kind of amazed and grateful. Sorry, I'm rushing us, but we only have like 10 minutes left. We probably will not finish these questions today, and we'll have to pick them up next week. We'll get behind, but that's fine. We're always behind. All right. And then 13, what title does Ruth give herself in verse 13?
Servant.
Right. So she gives herself the title of his servant, which is, she's not forcing herself into an employed position with him, but she's placing herself under him. She's recognizing that all of these things that he's giving to her, she's recognizing he's the one who's giving them to her and that they're undeserved. And so she's acknowledging that he doesn't owe her this stuff. She is his servant. She's placing herself under him in the social order. Again, it's a sign of humility and respect and gratefulness. Again, get into our typological language. That's how we should be responding to Jesus and all the things he gives us, rather than jumping up and going, hey, God likes me. You should all like me too and listen to what I say. No, we should be having that humble servant attitude through it all. All right. So now we take a lunch break. Question 14. When mealtime arrived, how did Boaz again show kindness to Ruth?
He had her sit with the reapers and himself.
Mm-hmm. So he has her sit with the men, which are, again, pretty segregated society. The young women would be over here, but Ruth gets to sit with the men, so that's a privileged seating position. So that's one thing he does. What else happens?
He gives her enough grain to satisfy herself and have some left over.
Right. So he gives her a bunch of food, and he serves her the food with his. And he passed to her the roasted grain. So he's giving the food directly to her. That's a big bump in social status. And he gives her not only enough to eat, but enough that she has some left over. She has a doggy bag that she gets to take home. So yeah, he's giving her a surplus of food. He's just like doing everything he can to butter her up, so to speak. Yeah, he's showing great kindness, great love and mercy to her. And again, typologically speaking, she doesn't deserve any of this. It's just Boaz saying, hey, I want to give you nice things. And again, that's how Jesus treats with us. We don't deserve the love and grace and mercy that he gives us, but he wants to give it to us because that's who he is. And so our response should not, our response should be like Ruth. We don't sit down and be like, hey, I'm more important than you because he likes me. Our response should be like, I don't deserve any of this. I'm your servant, but thank you. All right, then 15. Sorry, you can interrupt me if I'm cutting conversation short, but I am watching the clock. What further orders did Boaz give to his workers as Ruth began to glean?
Let her glean right among the sheaves. Get the first fruits.
Right. So among the sheaves, that means she's with the serving women now, basically. So again, it'd normally be reapers, and then the serving women who bundle the grain, and then all of the gleaners. He's saying Ruth is already at the front of the line of the gleaners. Now he's bumping her up one more position, so now she gets to go with the young women. So as his servant women are bundling up the sheaves of grain to bring over to the threshing floor for his harvest, Ruth gets to be there gleaning with them. She's like not even gleaning at this point, because gleaning is you go back, you go through the scraps, and you look for the grain that they missed and left behind. She gets to go to the freshly cut grain and just grab what she wants from it now. So,
do you know if the men were? I would assume the men would have actually been binding the grain as well, or were the women binding and the men were just harvesting?
The commentary I had said that the women would be the ones binding, and the men were just going through and cutting. It might not. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. That's just what I read, so I'm going off of that. But yeah, it is possible the men were binding it, and the women were just carrying it to the fields. But even then, Ruth is among the ones there, not picking up the scraps. So she is giving a very privileged position. And again, he also tells the men, don't rebuke her. He's again putting her under his protection. The men aren't allowed to gossip about her or, make the crude jokes that working class men sometimes make about women. They're not allowed to catcall her.
Well, if you're back in some of the small Amish farms back east, where it's too small to run a horse-drawn combine through the grain, they still harvest with the side. They have a special side that has fingers on it that holds as the man swings through and cuts the oats or wheat. All that's cut, it gathers up into a pile of that, and his wife or one of the daughters will be walking right off his left shoulder. And as he finishes this stroke and that's standing, she grabs it and then takes a couple of the strands and ties it and sets it. And it's a machine. Every time he takes a stroke, she picks it up and ties it and lays it down. And then someone else will come by and bind all those small ones up into a sheet.
Yeah, and I imagine that's basically what's happening. I don't know what their scythe technology was like at the time, but yeah, I would imagine it's something like that.
Yeah, I have no. That's the most ancient thing I've ever seen. So.
Yeah.
Well, the scythes they use is a single-handed scythe. They didn't have the cartoon-like scythe.
Yeah.
It's
more like a sickle.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, it takes muscle strength. Like the grain, when you grab one straw, it's easy to cut. But when you're taking a big swing, it takes speed and muscle strength. That's why the women you'll never see the women using the scythe in harvesting. Their job is to bundle and put away, because it's actually physically labor intensive
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, so they maybe didn't have the big size that we have now. It's probably more of a sickle, which limits how much you can cut at a time. But yeah, it's labor intensive to do the cutting. That's why the men are doing all the cutting, and then the women are gathering up and tying. And we are at time. So I'll make a note here. So next week we'll pick up on 16. So again, the lesson 4 packet are the notes that the study writer did on this. So if you want to read that on your own, go ahead. Next week we'll pick up on question 16, and I don't know, we'll probably won't spend the whole lesson on the last couple of questions. So then on the back of the lesson 4 packet are the questions for lesson 5. So if you want to do those on your own time, cool. But again, we're going through the questions anyway, so if you don't want to do them on your own time, you can fill in the answers as we go. I'm not grading you. I won't count it against you in my book, because I don't have a book. So yeah, we'll pick up on question 16 of the lesson 3 questions, and then assuming we don't spend the whole hour on the last 7 questions there, we'll start on the lesson 4 questions and see how far we get. And again, I'm sorry, the numbering system is weird, but there we are. All right. That being said, I will pray us out, and then we can start getting ready for the service. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are our Redeemer, that you have had mercy upon us, and that you lavish us with all the good gifts that we don't deserve. And we thank you for the foreshadowing you provided in the story of Ruth, that we might see all of this happening on an earthly level, that we might better understand what's happening on the heavenly level as you fulfill it through your Son, Jesus Christ. And we thank you for this opportunity to study this together, to gain a deeper understanding of the love that you have for us, and we ask that you would be with us as we prepare to receive your gifts in the divine service as we worship you this morning. We ask all of these things in your name, in which we pray. Amen.
Amen.